State adds Jaden Rashada out of the transfer portal from Sacramento State, a name that is very familiar to most college football fans, at least if you keep up with the sport. This is a guy who was a borderline 5-star prospect coming out of high school back in the 2023 class. I believe this is the player who was going to go to Florida and had a deal in place to go to Florida and ends up not taking Florida did not pay him what he had allegedly agreed to from an NIL standpoint. He then commits to Miami, ends up signing with Arizona State of all places, gets thrown into a starting role as a true freshman, doesn't go particularly well for him, then transfers to Georgia for a year as a kind of a deal. While he was, by the way, it was like actively suing Florida. That was like a whole thing going on. Transfers to Georgia to go sit for a year, and the idea was he was going to go get some experience and just kind of learn. Then hits the portal and follows Brennan Marion out to Sacramento State and was expected to be the starting quarterback there, go run the go-go offense. Doesn't happen. He does not become the starter at Sac State and ends up hitting the portal once again and now lands at Mississippi State, which is a very interesting landing spot for him. Apparently, Levy was very interested in Rashada just a couple of years ago when State ultimately landed on Blake Shapen as their quarterback. Thought Rashada would be the guy. And look, a guy that is a super high talent, that's for sure. Not the biggest in the world. He's tall. He's 6'4", but about 180. So it's a slender frame, but he does have the height on him. He has some really nice arm talent, can sort of sling the football around and do so pretty effortlessly, and can definitely push the ball downfield, has a quick release, those type of things you want to look for. Not a dual threat, and not a guy that's going to run the football a lot, but does have some mobility to him and can have some escapability in the pocket when there is pass rush there, and then make some plays with his legs, but not a guy that you're going to call a ton of rushing plays for. But look, a good athlete overall and a good player overall from a talent standpoint in terms of what he brings to the table. Now, as a QB, he has struggled, right? Like I said, at Arizona State, it was not going well for him before he ultimately was not the guy there. Goes and sits for a year at Georgia, couldn't win the job at Sac State. Is this a guy that you really look at as a player that's going to be a starting quarterback for a power conference program anytime soon? Probably not. It's still a very interesting addition, and not one that I think any of us were forecasting. We understood coming into this portal cycle, Mississippi State was going to have to take a transfer quarterback. You needed to have 3 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster. You had Camario coming back. You're bringing in Brody McQuarter as a true freshman. Who's going to be the third guy in the room? And you knew you needed to be a transfer, and you ideally wanted somebody with some playing experience. You wanted to have somebody that if you had to go to a number 2 quarterback, because God forbid something happened to Camario, you would like to have a QB that has been there, done it, has gotten in a game. And we talked about it. State's pickings were going to be slim, right? The quarterback portal market, there's no shortage of quarterbacks available in the portal. The problem is every single quarterback in the portal thinks that they are going somewhere to be the starting quarterback either this year or if it's a young guy, well, maybe the next year. Transfer quarterbacks are not leaving to go and sit on the bench for an extended period of time, especially at the end of their careers. You talk about wanting a guy with some game experience. Those guys, if they're in the portal as juniors, seniors, are typically going somewhere because it's like, hey, this is my final ride. This is my last shot to be a player somewhere. So it's going to be tough to get a guy like that. It was going to be tough to get a young quarterback as well, because even though maybe those guys are willing to sit for a year, Camario Taylor's going to be State's quarterback for the next 2 to 3 seasons. So it's not like your path to playing time anytime soon. It would be a deal there. So we knew State had limited options, and we kind of settled on you're probably going to have to take a player who has been to multiple schools. It hasn't worked out for them. They're at the end of their career, and they recognize, man, I've had my playing days. I'll go somewhere, and if the right opportunity pops for me, fantastic. But I'm content to just go and have one fun final run in playing college football, even as a backup quarterback. Go back to sit on the bench at an SEC program, and who knows, maybe get a jump start in coaching, learn from Jeff Lebby and an offense. Like that's what State was selling, and we said it on this show, just running down the list of quarterbacks who would be the type of guy to go to, and I happened to notice AJ Swan, and I was like, oh. That would actually make a lot of sense. I don't know it's going to be A.J. Swann, but a guy like A.J. Swann. Well, Mississippi State gets A.J. Swann, right? And he fits the mold perfectly. A veteran quarterback, has been in the SEC at multiple programs, has been an SEC starter, and at his best was playing pretty well when he was at Vanderbilt. Plenty of game experience, guy who's been around, someone who you trust. If something happens to Camario and you have to turn the reins over to another quarterback, he can come in and sort of right the ship. That said, a very limited skill set with A.J. Swann. It's not like you're talking about a guy who is super athletic. It's not like you're talking about a guy that's got just a ton of natural arm talent. A pretty good passer, but very much a just steady the ship type guy, go in and execute the offense type player, which is probably what you're going to be looking to. I think clearly what Lebby is looking at here by bringing in Jaden Rashada is wanting some competition for that number 2 spot, but also wanting to have options. For all of Rashada's flaws as a player to this point, the talent is very much there with him. Like I said, there is great arm talent. He is not, again, a runner, but he is someone that has an escapability to him that A.J. Swann does not have. That was something that people were concerned about when State took A.J. Swann is, State fans just in general have this belief of we've got to have a dual threat quarterback. And I understand where a lot of it comes from. And especially it can be beneficial. And within this system, there's the dynamic there that's fantastic to have. But a lot of it comes down to the fact that we've seen the guys that State has had these last few years that have not been great at running, or even more so had struggles escaping in the pocket. Blake Shapen in the open field could actually move a little bit. It's not like Blake Shapen couldn't run at all. The problem was Blake Shapen in the pocket, when you get pressure on him, couldn't escape it. Struggled with that mightily. And knowing State struggles along the offensive line, which of course they're trying to address, but has not been officially handled here just yet. If you had to turn it over to A.J. Swann, are you just screwed from a pass rush standpoint? Adding Jaden Rashada gives you a guy who, in theory, can handle that a little bit better. And I want to continue to reiterate, Jaden Rashada is not a dual threat quarterback. This is not a guy that you're bringing him in where you can run the exact same offense you're running with Camario. You're not going to call a bunch of quarterback run with him. I would say that if he's in the game, Jeff Lebby is going to call quarterback run with all of his – he would call it with A.J. Swann because that's just something Lebby does. It's a part of what he does within the offense. But he is someone that you would feel confident, hey, if there's pressure, he could make a play and still find a way to get out of it. And he's got the arm talent that, look, maybe you put him in a system like this and with the surrounding pieces State's going to have from a skill talent standpoint, and maybe Jaden Rashada you could in theory say that he's in the best situation he's been in his career. Obviously, some of that hinges on whether or not State does figure out the offensive line. But look, if you get him in with being able to throw to Anthony Evans and Marquise Johnson, and you have Fluff Bothwell with the run game to lean on a little bit, there's not a reason to say that he couldn't potentially be successful. So I think it makes sense. The competition side of it, I don't necessarily care so much about as I do. I like Jeff Lebby being able to have a couple options. If you had to turn it away from Camario Taylor, you've got a guy in A.J. Swann who I think you view as sort of the steady hand of like, all right, he can just come in and just be the guy at QB. You're probably not going to get much from a playmaking standpoint, but you trust him to go in and execute and ideally not screw things up. But then you also have Jaden Rashada where you say, look, there's some playmaking ability here. There's some raw natural talent where maybe he can make some throws that AJ couldn't. Maybe there's times AJ would have taken a sack, but he can go and escape that pressure. Those are the things you're looking for, to have that type of an option, to still have someone with a high talent ceiling in the room if Camario Taylor went down. It's a weird addition. I think Crystal Method summed it up the best with the Christmas Vacation gif of, Eddie, if I woke up with my head sewn to the carpet, I wouldn't be more surprised than I am right now. None of us saw this coming. We're talking about what is State going to do from a portal standpoint to round out this class. When you talk it out and you see them bringing another quarterback, you're like, okay, I see what they're doing. None of us thought it was going to happen. It's very, very interesting to see that play out with State, bringing in a quarterback that at this point in the class, when you're trying to think what are these final steps that they're going to take to round out the transfer class. So interesting pickup, but I think it does make sense for Mississippi State. Now, there's everyone is always going to wonder, what are you doing from an NIL standpoint? How much are we paying this guy to come here? I would be shocked if Mississippi State's paying significant money. I know that came up with Luke Kromenhoek a lot, that apparently he got a pretty nice deal to come to Mississippi State last year. And there are people who were ticked off about that because it's like, well, that's a wasted investment. With Kromenhoek, that's a guy who was a, second-year player, former 5-star player that you, in theory, could have said had a chance to start at Mississippi State. I know there's been people who have been like, no shot, it was always going to be Camario. Technically speaking, you never know with these high-talent players what they're going to be when they get to campus. Some of those guys still take a few years, and it was feasible that Kromenhoek could still come in and compete for a starting job. So I fully understand why they went to Kromenhoek and why they ultimately paid him what they did. Now that you've seen Camario, you know he's your guy. You also already have A.J. Swan, so it's not like you need another backup. I don't think this guy's coming in and is going to get much from a money standpoint for Mississippi State. Comment here. That's what I said. The offensive lawsuit won't change much with him. In the way K1 plays, it's good insurance to have. Yeah, I mean, I think it probably is closer to what you would have had with K1. I do think it changes some because, like I said, with Camario, they're going to make quarterback run is going to be a big part of the offense on a down-by-down basis. Lebby has always utilized quarterback run, but typically he reserves it for red zone and short yardage. Those are kind of the two spots. And then, obviously, look, occasionally we've seen Shapen bust out a zone read just kind of to catch the defense napping. But Lebby likes it down in the red zone when the field is constricted, so you like to have those extra numbers. He also likes it in short yardage for the same reason. You're expecting run, so let's get another blocker at the point of attack with our running back, or have some sort of a fake to open things up, and then we get the run game with the QB. That's typically where Lebby uses it, as opposed to any given play can be a QB run. With Camario in the game, any given play can be a QB run. They're not going to run him into the ground, but they're going to run him quite a bit. I think with Rashada, it probably goes back to more of what Lebby typically does, is we'll pick our spots to call a quarterback run here, or we'll mostly just let him use his legs to scramble. But, you have that capability with him. Best case scenario here is he learns under Lebby need a red shirt. Well, he's already taken a red shirt at this point. He redshirted when he was at Georgia. I don't know what his eligibility situation. I'd imagine he has 2 years to play. It's interesting to see what he does here. It is like, is he planning on riding it out for Mississippi State going forward? Because again, Camario is going to be your guy for at least the next 2 seasons. You would think so. But look, it's a good pickup. I don't hate the move of bringing him in. Again, this is a call-in show, so hey, opportunity. If any of you guys want to come and be a part of the action, give us your thoughts. I do have a little bit of a different topic to get into, although we spent 15 minutes talking about a backup quarterback, so maybe we'll keep the Indiana stuff limited, even though that's the headline to the episode. But yeah, it's a call-in show, so if you want to come and give your thoughts, talk about Jaden Rashada, talk about the portal class, talk about Jordan Seaton, Brandon Sneh, who we'll get to here in just a sec, or the other idea for the show, you see Indiana winning a national title. Does that change your thoughts on what's possible at Mississippi State? Thought that'd be a fun thing to talk about tonight. So if you want to be a part of the action, we have a link to the stream in the description of the video, also pinned to the top of the chat. Just click StreamYard, make sure your mic is working, camera turned off, we'll bring you on stage, and we'll have a little fun discussion here on this Thursday evening. Just mention it, and like I said at the top of the episode, I forgot to talk about this, which is crazy because it's a big deal considering the state's needs. But they bring in Brandon Sneh from UAB, was the starting left tackle for the Blazers this past season. A guy who started his career down in the D2 ranks, then moved up to the FCS, played at Wagner, then going into last year, transferred to Kansas State initially, left in the spring. And look, I don't know the situation there, although look, most likely when a guy transfers out in the spring, especially a player rising up, we saw it with State with some of their offensive linemen last season. Probably a situation of like, all right, I'm not going to make it this year. Let me go find another place where I can play and continue to ascend. Goes to UAB and was their guy at left tackle and had a good season for the Blazers. Let me see if I can pull up, go to our great friend Hill State Muse, because I know he has all the stat. If there's stats on a player in the portal, he's got them. Let me see what he had for Brandon Sneh. I'm trying to remember there it is. Started 11 games at left tackle, 78.2 pass block grade from PFF, which is solid. That's a good grade. I think PFSN, so the guys who were doing those grades for Kelly Jones throughout the season that were putting Kelly as one of the top corners in the country, I think they had him as like a top 6 tackle in the American Conference, something like that. But had a good, solid season. Handled his own, did not give up a bunch of pressure. Listed 6'6", 312. Everyone has said he is not that tall. I think he's taller than the 6'2" number that's going around. It's more like 6'4", but definitely has a frame that he can get needs to put some weight onto. And that'll be the big thing with him is can he get his weight up a little bit more to be a bigger body out there on the edge. I'll be completely honest. I don't really care so much about how big the guy is. I just care, can you go out and good protection? That's the big thing for me. I've watched one game of his, the most significant opponent UAB played last year. They went to Knoxville, took on Tennessee. We know Tennessee had a very good defensive front. We've seen Mississippi State against that defensive front, and it went poorly. And I thought Brandon Sneh played well. Got a ton of pass blocks reps in that game. They did not run the football much at all. When they did run the ball, I thought he was fine. It wasn't like he was mauling guys out there, but he was at least getting his block. And he was not the issue for them not being able to get much in the run game going in that game. But in pass protection, I thought he held up well. Definitely had a couple reps where he got beat. There were a couple times where the edge rusher for the Vols was able to get around him. But for the most part, handled business. And it wasn't like on a play-by-play basis. Tennessee is like, man, he's just getting knocked back, and UAB is just having to scheme around this. And look, UAB definitely, there was a lot of trying to get the ball out quick. They moved the pocket. They broke out the ninja formation multiple times. If y'all remember, if y'all have heard the ninja formation with Mike Leach, I know it's in the old NCAA football playbooks. I think it's the monster formation, where they would you split offensive linemen out wide. Like you keep like 3 linemen in with a quarterback and maybe a running back, and then you put multiple linemen out, and you have wide receivers behind them for screen passes. And they were playing snaps out of that throughout the game, which was very interesting. So they were definitely trying to scheme some stuff up, which takes pressure off your O-line. So maybe he was not in the same scenarios you would typically see. But again, he still got plenty of pass block reps and played pretty well in that game. So we've seen him go against SEC competition and play well. I like the fact that this is a player that has ascended throughout his career. And I don't really care about the quick, brief couple months at Kansas State. Guys who have started a lot of games and continue to ascend and take on other roles elsewhere, those are players I am interested in bringing into the program. I love experience. I've hit it a million times, especially talking about offensive line. Experience is such a big deal to me when you talk about that spot. And I love the idea of a guy continued to play and play and play and got better. And when he went up another level, he was still good enough. When he went up another level, was still good enough. And now you get him in an SEC weight room. Ideally, you do bulk him up a little bit because that stuff does matter, but the production is what matters the most to me. This feels like a solid addition for Mississippi State at left tackle. And look, this is a kid that other SEC programs were wanting. Auburn and Oklahoma were very much interested in this kid. So it's not like you're on an island here taking a player that nobody else wanted. Brandon Sneh is a good pickup for Mississippi State, and as it stands currently, is the guy that you would expect is going to step in and be your left tackle for next season, or at least compete for the job.